On this Thursday night, the exhausting battle against Nova Scotia's relentless wildfires, the punishing conditions for crews, the reinforcements on the way, and the hope for rain.
Our fingers are crossed that we're going to receive that precipitation.
The shortfalls in sharing intelligence about foreign meddling, what Canada's National Security Advisor says needs to change. As Pride Month begins, Uganda stands firm on its harsh anti-gay laws.
Let's remember that not all of us are free.
What this means for Ugandan refugee claimants in Canada. And the art of self-acceptance.
I've got to come to grips with who I am.
One Japanese-Canadian painter's journey to embracing his family's history.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight in Nova Scotia. Help is on the way to fight the fires that continue to threaten communities and have forced thousands of people from their homes. Crews from other provinces, the United States, and as far away as Costa Rica are coming, and the Canadian military is being dispatched to help relieve exhausted Nova Scotia crews. Yet some people in the province, according to the Mayor of Halifax, are still contributing to the problem.
Believe it or not, in the last 12 hours, we have had somebody burning leaves with a propane torch. We've had somebody else who was starting a bonfire. This is a clear violation of the no stupid policy, if ever there is one. And I think everybody can understand that. Don't do it.
16 fires are burning in Nova Scotia. 4 of them are out of control. Hot, dry weather plus gusting winds are making fighting them harder. Mike Armstrong is in Upper Tantallon near Halifax.
Donna, with multiple fires across the province, there's sort of an expression we've been hearing from firefighters over and over today. We are stretched, but holding. These were welcome and warranted breaks. For firefighters working the Tantallon fire, extreme heat made this a grueling day. With the humidity, temperatures felt like 35 degrees Celsius. Add to that the firefighting gear, what some call ironically their snowsuit. The heat and wind also worsens wildfires. There's rain in the forecast, and there's hope that it comes.
Our fingers are crossed that we're going to receive that precipitation and help us a little bit. We need Mother Nature to get on side with us on this.
One thing that's worked in the favor of firefighters is the topography. The region is dotted with lakes. Helicopters are able to reload easily and quickly.
We're turning about 20 to 30 drops an hour. Wherever there's a fire, we're no more than 300-400 meters away from doing the drop.
Now the Tantallon fire is 50% contained, enough that one area had its evacuation order lifted Wednesday night.
Going to put it in the house.
The Whites moved back in this morning after 4 stressful days.
Our daughter was actually having a baby as well, so he was in the neonatal unit. Our house was potentially going to burn down. It was a tough time.
At the southwest end of Nova Scotia, the evacuation orders are still growing. 2 fires continue to burn out of control. 50 homes have been destroyed. The region is more sparsely populated, but the fire's having a major impact.
Our municipality, we probably lost almost 50% of our employees because they've been directly affected. They've got to evacuate their house and their families.
There has been frustration from Nova Scotia's Premier about Ottawa's reaction this week.
These conditions, this early in the season, are unprecedented.
The federal government Thursday promised new resources. By the morning, there should be military personnel and equipment starting to arrive to relieve firefighters. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Halifax.
This early start to the fire season is worrying. According to the federal government's Canadian Drought Monitor, as of April, 34% of the country was classified as being in moderate to severe drought, including 61% of the country's agricultural areas. In Atlantic Canada, neighbouring New Brunswick is battling its own set of early wildfires, and a much larger swath of the region is expected to remain under abnormally dry conditions in the coming weeks, including parts of Newfoundland and a chunk of Labrador. Some areas in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI, shown in orange, are already considered to be in a moderate drought. Further west, the situation is even more alarming. An early and explosive wildfire season is well underway, and parts of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, shown here in brown, are already in severe drought conditions. The abnormally dry weather is expected to spread well into the Northwest Territories and stretch east into Manitoba and parts of Ontario. Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell is with me. Anthony, what's ahead in the forecast?
Donna, definitely a glimmer of hope, and for many, much more than that. A complete change in the weather pattern is coming. All of the record temperatures and droughty conditions being replaced by cool air and a lot of rainfall. Today was the hottest of the entire week, 35 degrees in Fredericton and Miramichi, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, all breaking daily records for June 1st. But we are also tracking a cold front. As it moves in, there is the risk of thunderstorms. We don't want lightning strikes where it's been so dry, but we definitely need the beneficial rain, and there will be a lot of that as we go into Friday, and especially this weekend. Scattered showers turns into a widespread rain across Nova Scotia, and that rain will continue right through early next week. Local amounts of 30 to 80 millimeters, which is going to do a great job not just containing these fires, but likely putting them out when it combines with the cooler than normal temperatures. Donna?
Global News meteorologist Anthony Farnell, thanks. Here's one measure of how dry it is in Alberta. This landspout tornado was spotted near Stettler yesterday. It picked up huge amounts of dirt and dust and stayed over open fields, though, and no damage was reported. There was a frank admission today from the top national security advisor to the Prime Minister. Jody Thomas says there have been breakdowns in the way intelligence reports are handled by the government. She's testifying at a House of Commons committee looking into allegations the Chinese government has been targeting members of Parliament. Eric Sorensen reports on what she said and whether anything's been fixed.
The briefing from CSIS confirmed to me
at least 3 MPs, former Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, Conservative MP Michael Chong, and New Democrat Jenny Kwan, have now been told they were targets of foreign interference. But top officials in government say they did not know.
The Prime Minister was not made aware.
Jody Thomas, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, the crucial point person between national intelligence and the country's top political leadership, said her predecessors did not tell the PM, and he only learned of it after recent leaks to the media.
I cannot account for the lack of information flow to the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office, and I'm not going to speculate. I agree that there needs to be a better management of intelligence.
Thomas says she missed one memo while on vacation, a breakdown in communication that she says is being improved. Bill Blair, when he was Minister of Public Safety, also pleaded ignorance to intelligence that he says the director of CSIS did not share with him.
Quite clearly, if they determine that information is not required to be shared with us, and I have no knowledge of that, I would not have the opportunity to act on it.
The Conservatives' critic on the Procedure and House Affairs Committee suggested that the Prime Minister either was briefed or should have been.
How is it that the Prime Minister didn't know? Why were those MPs kept in the dark? And in the face of all of that, would you not at least concede that that is a colossal breakdown of the machinery of government under this Prime Minister's watch?
Jody Thomas says while CSIS is constrained from sharing sensitive intelligence, there needs to be more transparency with the Canadian public and with MPs who will now be told when they are targets, even if the intel isn't deemed credible.
There is absolutely a risk to transparency. There is a greater risk to not talking about foreign interference.
Next week, the Special Rapporteur, David Johnston, will be questioned at the committee about his report on foreign interference, but likely will be pressed to end his part in the investigation after a majority of MPs voted that he step aside. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The U.S. is denouncing what it calls an aggressive move by China over the South China Sea. The U.S. military says a Chinese jet flew dangerously close to this American aircraft last week. The Chinese have been increasing their military presence in the disputed region. Canada's HMCS Montreal is there too as part of Operation Projection to promote peace and stability. Our Mackenzie Gray is on board, and tonight he gives us a rare bird's-eye view of the mission.
85,000 boats travel through the South China Sea every year, but HMCS Montreal is on the hunt for just one.
We were made aware of a Chinese dredging vessel that is in the area that is reportedly dredging on top of HMS Prince of Wales wreckage site.
HMS Prince of Wales, a British ship, sunk by Japanese torpedoes in 1941, killing 327 on board. The Chinese boat, allegedly willing to disturb those graves for a shot at Second World War memorabilia. To find it, the cyclone helicopter on board the Montreal has been dispatched.
We're not here to escalate any tensions. We're here to be a reporting asset and just a forward presence for the Navy.
But after over an hour's worth of flying, no luck. An unsuccessful mission with a positive twist.
We weren't able to locate them today, which is good because it means they weren't in the vicinity of the wreckage that they were suspectedly pillaging.
The search, one of the numerous flights the Montreal cyclone undertakes while at sea, and we were lucky enough to join them for one. From the air, a beautiful view of the ship. It's over 30 years old, but it's undergone extensive renovations to upgrade many of the systems.
I know it sounds loud, but it's a surprisingly smooth ride here on the Cyclone, which helps give the Montreal forward presence and can conduct anti-submarine warfare.
That versatility making it one of the Montreal's most valuable assets.
So we're always looking to see sort of who's in the area, who's on the surface, who else is up in the air.
But before a ride is up, one last assignment. Hoisting me down to the flight deck, a maneuver normally used to ensure a quick exit, performed perfectly by the crew. As for the Chinese ship, it was detained by Malaysian authorities the day after the Montreal went looking for it. And on board, Donna, scrap metal and cannonballs believed to be from HMS Prince of Wales.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray on the South China Sea, thanks. A teenage girl is facing criminal charges after fireworks went off inside a Toronto transit bus.
It's not popping.
The 14-year-old, who cannot be identified, has been charged with mischief endangering life. No one was hurt when the fireworks were set off inside that bus, but it was filled to capacity. The Toronto Transit Commission says there have been at least 7 incidents in 10 days involving fireworks on transit vehicles. Running for safety in Kyiv. Coming up, reports an air raid shelter was locked as people tried to escape Russian missiles. Ukraine is being accused of shelling a Russian border town using Soviet-era rockets. A residential low-rise building caught fire and a neighboring administration building was also damaged. There were no reported injuries, and Ukraine denies any involvement. President Volodymyr Zelensky has renewed calls for his country and others bordering Russia to join NATO and the European Union. He was speaking to European leaders in Moldova today and said without membership there is either open war or occupation. Ukraine was pounded again today with a barrage of Russian missiles. In the capital, 3 people were killed, including a child, because the shelter they ran to was locked. Crystal Goomansingh reports.
Even when missiles and drones fired at Ukraine are shot down, there's no escaping the possibility of death. This man now faces unspeakable tragedy. Under the foil blanket lies the body of his 9-year-old granddaughter, according to those at the scene. It appears the 3 victims, including the child's mother and another woman, were hit by falling debris. They were trying to get into a shelter that was locked.
In shelter was people, and the question they was before and or after. I can't say yes or no. I can give you a clear answer for that. Investigation give the answer for that.
The mayor of Kyiv has ordered all public shelters be checked to ensure they're accessible. While he was at the site, another siren. Every day this week, the capital has come under attack from Russian airstrikes.
Here in Moldova, luckily we don't hear air raid, sirens, or the sound of Russian artillery.
Just 20 kilometers from the Ukrainian border and the war, the European political community gathered for its second summit, with security as the main topic. Volodymyr Zelensky called for Ukraine to be admitted to NATO this year, although there's no sign that will happen. Back in Kyiv, families laid flowers and toys where the 9-year-old was killed. June 1st is Children's Protection Day in Ukraine, but parents confess to feeling powerless in the face of relentless missile and drone strikes. He sat in the corner of our corridor. He cried, saying that we're all going to die. I was terrified to hear this from him. Since the full-scale invasion, Zelensky says at least 484 children have been killed by Russian aggression. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Restricting rights ahead why being openly gay in Uganda could now mean the death penalty. Today marks the start of Pride celebrations across Canada. In many parts of the world, though, gay and trans people have no rights. In some places, being openly gay is a crime. Uganda has just passed some of the harshest anti-gay laws in the world, and the president there says he will not reverse them despite widespread condemnation. Global News has learned those laws will affect how some Ugandan refugee claims are assessed here in Canada. Redmond Shannon explains.
As soon as Uganda's president signed the new anti-gay bill, human rights lawyers filed a challenge.
The Speaker clearly made statements that showed that she was in favor of passing this law, and yet the Speaker is supposed to be basically impartial.
Opponents also complained that not one LGBTQ2 person was consulted by lawmakers. Same-sex relationships were already illegal in Uganda. The new law includes the death penalty for same-sex transmission of HIV, deliberate or otherwise, and for serial offenders against anti-gay laws. Uganda joins 11 other countries where homosexuality is or could be punishable by death. Many members of Uganda's LGBTQ2 community believe that getting out is the only option they have left.
You are arresting us for literally doing nothing, for simply existing, but where are we supposed to go? How did we become refugees in our own countries?
Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada told Global News that the new law in Uganda means some Ugandans who have been refused a refugee claim in the past year may now be able to reapply for a pre-removal risk assessment before returning to Uganda.
The signing is finished, nobody will move us.
Uganda's president is defiant as Washington threatens visa restrictions for Ugandan officials and aid cuts.
If they interfere with our trade, we shall trade with others.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called Uganda's law appalling and abhorrent. Global Affairs Canada says it will work with partners in the region to support persecuted communities. Activists from Uganda ask that those who struggle for the most basic of rights not be forgotten this Pride Month.
As everyone is out there celebrating, let's remember that not all of us are free.
Freedoms most of us take for granted remain denied to millions just for being who they are. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Shapes in between next, a Japanese-Canadian artist's journey to honor his heritage. There was a period in this country when Japanese Canadians were considered enemy aliens, stripped of their property and forced to move, many into internment camps. That was during the Second World War, and it shaped the lives of future generations. Well, now a legendary Japanese Canadian artist is exploring his history through a retrospective of his work. Turia Isri looks at the work and life of Norman Takeuchi.
Norman Takeuchi has been an artist for 60 years, but in some ways considers himself a late bloomer.
At some point I thought, I've got to come to grips with who I am.
His life's work is on display at the Ottawa Art Gallery, a retrospective spanning decades and a rediscovery of his identity.
From early on, I, like a lot of people my generation, felt a certain amount of shame. In my earlier work, there was absolutely no indication at all of my ethnic background.
Takeuchi was born in Vancouver in 1937 to Japanese Canadian parents. When he was just 4 years old, he and his family were forcibly removed from their homes. The Canadian government sent more than 20,000 Japanese Canadians to internment camps during the Second World War.
My family was one of the so-called self-supporting families. And rather than send us to a camp, we were sent to a small community in the middle of BC. Like a lot of the other families, they lost everything.
His parents rebuilt their lives and paved the way for Takeuchi to follow his passion as a graphic designer.
How old are you in this picture?
I was about 27.
His big break came at Expo 67 in Montreal, and then Expo 70 in Osaka. He also found success as a painter, but it took 30 years before Takeuchi began incorporating his culture in his work.
Catherine knows more about me now than I do.
The representation of his dual heritage is featured in the new exhibit entitled Shapes in Between. Catherine Sinclair is the curator. She helped choose the name by asking Takeuchi a question.
Well, where do we find you, Norman? And he responded something to the effect of, well, I'm in the shapes in between. And that just felt like a very poetic way of understanding where he finds himself.
To learn about history that we should know about, that we don't, it's really a wonderful opportunity.
At 85, he only now feels like he's made it.
It wasn't until this exhibition that I started to feel, well, maybe I'm doing some good work after all.
He says that good work was only possible because of the support of his wife of 57 years, Marion. 6 decades of love, art, and self-discovery. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.